Hello and welcome to Joko Yo. Our John Hinton, the subject of several of our episodes, had children that either made history themselves or married people whose names also appear significantly in North Carolina's history. One of his sons, also named John Hinton, married a person named Farabee Smith, daughter of John Smith, whom the town of Smithfield was named for. A daughter, Alice, married a guy named John James. One of their children was the first person to graduate from UNC Chapel Hill, Hinton James. Another of the Hinton kids was Sarah, who married Needham Bryan, who essentially controlled the tobacco trade along the Neuse River from Garner to Smithfield, and is partially responsible for tobacco being so much a symbol of this state. He had other daughters, Elizabeth, Martha, Mary, and a son James, who all show up in early North Carolina history. This one is about James, who married a person named Delilah Hunter. I love these old names. Delilah was one of two children born to Theophilus Hunter and Mary Lane. Theophilus, again, such great names, was not so different from the Hintons. But they all seem to travel in the same circles, so it only makes sense that their children all married each other when there were fewer people, and these people were kind of picky about who their descendants were. Like John Hinton. He also obtained grants of multiple thousands of acres for farming and, stuff like that. And Theophilus' home was in the wilderness of what was then south of Raleigh, which didn't, of course, exist yet. His home sat on the old stage road to Fayetteville, and if that name sounds familiar, it should, because that road still has that name. He was a justice of the peace in Johnston County before Wake was carved out of it, like a lot of other large landowners, and as a justice of the peace, he was one of the people responsible for drawing boundaries for the colony. In other words, when it came time to decide where courthouses and other public buildings should be located, he and other landowners were called upon to do it, which is how Theophilus found himself on the committee in 1759 to lay out the grounds for the Johnston County Courthouse with John Hinton and others at Hinton's Quarter near modern-day Clayton. It is also how, in 1761, he was put on another commission to run the western boundary line between Johnston County and the newly created Orange County, which was carved out of it. He was on commissions to survey towns, commissions to create government, commissions to decide property lines, and y'all, when people say ridiculous things like drain the swamp, of lifetime government officials, they're talking about getting rid of people like Theophilus, who literally was one of the people who drained swamps. He literally drained swamps so people would have a place to live. If you drained the swamp, so to speak, there would be no one there to, drain the swamps. But, whatever. So, whenever Wake County was formed from Johnston, Theophilus Hunter, along with John Hinton and others, were again called upon to draw lines at the boundaries of Wake and redraw the new western boundary of Johnston, lay out land for a new Wake County courthouse, Wake County jail, and draw up contracts with workers to build them. He also had to redraw the line of Orange and Cumberland counties to create Wake. When the Regulator War hit North Carolina and Governor Tryon needed a headquarters for his army to put down that rebellion, it was at Hunter's house that he stayed in 1771. And when the revolution was starting to hit North Carolina, Theophilus, who worked with the colonial governor, he was on a committee to form a regiment and was chosen to be an officer in it to fight against that very same government when he saw that government had become, corrupt. In 1775, Mr. Hunter represented Wake in the Revolutionary-era North Carolina government, another committee, in Hillsborough, which would eventually become the new government of the state, not colony, after the Revolution, of North Carolina. As part of another committee, he helped to contract out the building of the Orange County Courthouse. It seems he was experienced as a long-term member of government. So, drain the swamp? I mean, whatever. Just whatever. It does need to be said that he believed that he could own other people and acted according to his belief by being the second largest slaveholder in Wake. That's a massive stain on his family's legacy. Massive stain. But he did do these things, even if his ownership of other people helped him make these accomplishments possible. Theophilus was married 2 times, and his first marriage to presumably Mary Lane resulted in 2 children, Delilah, who married John Hinton, and Isaac. Isaac, the brother of Delilah and brother-in-law to John Hinton, had his own story to tell. You see, his father gave him 500 or so acres of land in 1762, just north of Crabtree Creek, and he hoped his son would continue to expand their holdings, but it seems that Isaac Hunter just didn't have the leanings of his father. He wasn't much of a businessman. But, as happens sometimes with such people, Isaac did know how to be a good host to travelers. You see, he applied for a business permit from the Johnston County government to operate a tavern out of his home in 1769, probably partially due to his father's influence. It was granted, and for a while it was the only tavern in the newly made county of Wake. You can still walk the grounds of that tavern if you visit the North Raleigh Hilton, which is built on top of its site. If you know much about colonial or early American history, or if you have listened to another episode of this podcast where everybody knows your name, you'll understand the importance of taverns as the country was being formed. I mean, some say that without the Sons of Liberty, there would not have been a Boston Tea Party, or the battles of Lexington and Concord that started the Revolution, and many of their plans were laid in taverns around Boston. It has often been noted that 3 taverns in Philadelphia were where the signers of the Declaration of Independence and the framers of the Constitution went after their days building new governments to plan what would happen the next day in Congress. In short, taverns were absolutely instrumental in early American history. Ben Franklin himself said so. And Isaac Hunter's tavern was no different. In 1788, when independence had been achieved and the North Carolina Congress had decided that this state needed a permanent capital, it should be hardly surprising that its proximity to a tavern was necessary, regardless of where the capital was to be. They may not have known where they were going to put the capital, but they did know that it could be no further than 10 miles from one. A tavern, that is. With delegations from New Bern and Fayetteville, Hillsborough, and others on the verge of violence, with each one trying to get their towns to be the capital, the General Assembly decided to simply just build a new capital from scratch that was accessible to all of those guys. It could be argued that it really wasn't, but still. That spot was Wake. And the tavern that decided where the new city of Raleigh would be was Isaac Hunter's Tavern, the most well-stocked tavern in the entire area. Isaac loved alcohol and having a good time, which was probably what made his tavern so popular. It is, at any rate, what drove him into debt, wrecked his liver, and killed him eventually. But he did see opportunity and did try to sell land to the North Carolina Congress to build a new capital. They liked him, but not enough to make him the father of Raleigh. They did, however, meet there to choose whose land they would buy. Joel Lane's. And that's, again, for another story, and also yet another hidden connection. Actually, two, but again, that's for another time. And thanks for listening. Until next time, y'all be good.